Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning again. You may be seated. So we are in the last week of our Becoming series, and I thought that it would be fitting for us to talk to someone who is in this process of becoming, intentionally placed herself in this process of becoming, and is very intentional about becoming the person that God has created her to be, a disciple of Christ. So I asked Julie Johnson, and most of you probably know Julie, but Julie has been very involved in our church for the last 4 years. And yes, those of you who know her. Julie and her husband Ben have been a part of just about every initiative that we have taken here at the church. And if you remember, just a year ago, it was their idea to adopt a family from Afghanistan, bring them here, set them up with housing. And I've been talking to Julie and Ben on the phone before, and they were taking the family, to get driver's lessons and driver's tests. And now that family is settled. They have jobs. They are integrating into our culture, our society, and it's a beautiful thing to see all of that. And that just gives you a little picture of the heart of Julie and of Ben. And Julie has been on our planning team, our worship planning team, I guess as long as we've had a worship planning team. And she is just such a huge part of even our Sunday morning services. She volunteers as a director. Gosh, she just does so much. And so I asked her if she would come and just talk to us this morning. And so we're going to sit down and have a little chat about what it really means, this idea of becoming. So would you help me welcome Julie Johnson? You have to clap until she gets to the stage. Come on, Julie. She doesn't have her mic.
Not used to this.
So Julie is, she's quiet, but don't let that fool you. She has a lot going on that you probably don't talk a lot about, all the things that are going on in your life. But she just recently got her PhD, and yep. All the other stuff going on. You also lead a Girl Scout troop. So all of that and a PhD at the same time. And you were asked to speak. Where was it that you went?
We went to Ireland over the summer, and I presented part of my dissertation in Ireland and at a conference, and just working conferences now. And I'm also teaching. I'm a high school history and English teacher, so I started working back in the field after being at home with the kids for 10 years.
Not everybody gets asked to go to a conference over in Ireland to present their dissertation. Must have been good.
Yeah, it was a great time.
So anyway, I'm going to get rid of this water because I don't need it. So you and I have talked a lot. In fact, this whole series, Becoming, came from your notes during one of my sermons months ago, and you brought this back up. And so let's just get started here and get in to this. So, and these are not questions that we talked about, okay? So I'm just going to just coming to me, okay? When did you first become aware that this was the process, that God was actually changing us, and this was a very strong calling that God had in your life? And when did you realize that and make that decision to submit your life? I know you were probably, we have levels of faith. And I know you probably had faith before, but when was that point where you realized this is serious, serious business?
Yeah, for those of you that don't know me, I have a long history and walk with God. I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school and all that, and then was saved about 25 years ago. So this has been a long journey for me as far as my Christian faith. But just in the last few years, I've been undergoing this intentional transformation. I've done the Bible. I've got bookshelves full of my Bible study books, and did the alarm clocks on my alarm for my morning devotionals, and spent time in small groups, and all of those things have really contributed to my growth and my understanding of God and who I am. But I would say about a year and a half ago is when I started to feel like I was ready to take it to the next level. And I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what that meant. I'd had friends that talked about the connection that they have with God and Christ, and this constant community with Christ, and there's that light in people. There's some people that you just see the light of Christ shining out of them, and that's what I knew I wanted. That's what I was looking for, not because those other things hadn't grown me, they did, but I was waiting for a deeper connection with Christ that I hadn't yet gotten. And I think it's that conversation that we had about 6 months ago, last summer, was when I realized that was happening. But really, it was about a year and a half ago that I thought, I'm ready for my faith, my journey, my relationship with Christ to be taken up to the next level. I want that deeper connection. I want that light shining out of me. I want my children to see that light, and my husband, and so I don't know if I have that light shining out of me, but that's the process that I'm pursuing.
Well, I can tell you that Lene and I, we meet with Julie every week, and I can tell you that we see it. How was this? How was your idea, maybe, of this Christian walk? How was it different than what you realized God's idea was?
Yeah, I think about a year and a half ago when I was starting, I was into running. I was listening to a lot of worship music and listening to a lot of audio books on faith, and so I was just trying to find, like all the things that you've mentioned, Girl Scout troop and PhD and wife to my husband and 2 kids, and all of the things that we all have different hats that we wear. We all have different busy lives. And I was trying to figure out how I could fit God into that. And I realized, or God spoke to me, or put it on my heart, that that's not what I should be doing. I shouldn't be trying to fit God into my time or my life. It should be a constant, just happening. It should always be. And so when I had started thinking about what my process was as far as growing closer to him, I had to set aside all of those preconceived notions of checking off the boxes. Mm-hmm. And I had to think about really what it is that God is wanting from me, that I'm needing from him, and to try to set aside my expectations of what it is that was. Because the more that I thought, okay, I know what I need to do, or if I do these things, then I'll grow closer to God, the more that I had that frame of mind, I'd done it for years, and it just didn't seem to be, I was close to God, and I loved God, but I didn't feel that deeper kinship with him. And I think when I started to realize that maybe my process or my expectations or the way that I thought it should look like, maybe that's not the way that it works, then my mind started to open. Then I started to realize God's got a whole different mentality. He's got a whole different mindset as far as what he wants from me. If I sleep through my 5 a.m. alarm and I miss my morning devotional, he's not disappointed. He's not thinking, well, you missed your time with me, sorry, and it's going to be a rough day. So he doesn't think of me that way. He doesn't think of us that way. He basks in our love for him and who we are. And I think once I realized that he wasn't disappointed or waiting or angry,
Yeah.
I think once I realized that, I thought, well, that's just, I couldn't ask for anything more to not have this hanging over me, to all of a sudden be free enough to live my life and do all the things I need to do, and just have God a part of that and be intentional about having God with me along the way.
You know, I back during COVID, I remember preaching this. It was just me and Ryan in the room upstairs, and we were doing the video. But I remember it was called God in the Loop, you know, and bringing God into the loop of your thinking, into the loop of the things that you plan, into the things that you say and do. And I think that's what you're talking about. And then the other part that you were talking about, checking the boxes and all of that, you know, to me, that is part of the process. I think that most people come to Christ and they do those things. And in my mind, and I probably even said it here on a Sunday morning, that is like elementary, primary education, primary school for Christians. And I think what you have entered into is a higher, you know, this rings true with you, right? Because you're into education, but it's a higher type of living with Christ. And so tell me.
Even things like church,
Yeah.
like during COVID and after, you know, we kept our distance the way everybody did in 2020, but, you know, coming through or coming back out of that, there's a desire to want to be here. It's not that checking off the box. And it's not necessarily just here in this room. It's church, just being in God's community. And there's that intrinsic, embedded desire within me now that it's not something I'm just checking off the box. I'm here. I'm reading my Bible if I feel called to do that, and I'm getting so much more out of it, not because it's a check off the box thing. I'm still doing all those things. I'm still doing devotionals or studies, but it's taken on a new meaning. I've taken off my requirement for it, and instead have invited in just the Spirit of God to speak through it and to use it.
Yeah, and we've talked about that it's the people, it's the community that you have with people, and it's there's something for lack of a better word, magical, spiritual about being together, worshiping together, coming and being in the presence of God together. You also have talked about the constantness, or that's not even a word, but the constant becoming, like this is a constant thing. Talk to me just a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it sounds exhausting or daunting at first, but when I realized that it's not these things that I have to fulfill by the end of the day, or God won't be disappointed if I've just lost track of time, I haven't spent time with him today. He's not disappointed in me. He's not, he's just looking for whatever I can give him, he's happy with. And he's proud of me regardless of if I fail myself, or if I think I fail, or I'm not doing enough. So just changing or realizing that God, the way God sees me and the way that he sees all of us, the way that we see our children or our parents see us. For those lucky enough to have parents that look at you that way, I think of my mom and just how incredibly proud, and then I look at my children, and there's so little that they could do to truly hurt me or disappoint me. and they're still little, so I know they have time. But regardless, that love for them will never go away. It will never wane. And that's exactly God's love for us. And so being in that constant state of just thanksgiving and communication, I don't have a time now that I sit down and pray. And you talk about your prayer closet a lot. I'm not that disciplined to have a place and a time where I can go. I do it different. And my communication with God is throughout the day, just in small bursts, or when I'm feeling that anxiety, or I'm having an argument with my husband and I don't know what to say, or I know what I want to say and what I shouldn't say. It's closing my eyes and getting back in tune with God and just letting him speak into me, and what is it that you want from me? What should I say in this moment? What will you have me do? And that constantly going back to God for the insight, for the guidance. And I mentioned earlier that my expectations were different. I think the only thing that I've changed is that I've dropped my expectations and I've just started to expect that God will be there. And I think in that simple act of just knowing he's going to be there when I close my eyes, or when I whisper a small prayer or make a small request, he's hearing me, he's present with me constantly. And I think just that comfort of knowing has been so transformational, as far as he's always with us. He's with us all the time, and he never leaves us. And truly knowing that and experiencing that on a regular basis, it just feeds into it more, and it builds that faith stronger.
Wow. So there's a concept that Jesus introduced on the cross, and he also introduced it to his disciples. He said, if anyone would come after me, let him take up his cross and follow me. And then the Apostle Paul continued with that thought and that idea of dying to ourselves, and it's not always comfortable. How have you dealt with that? Because you have to deal with that part. It's not always, it doesn't always feel warm and fuzzy. It doesn't always feel nice and easy and all of those things.
Yeah, I think of it like a swimming pool. So like faith is like a swimming pool. You can wade in the shallow end where you're safe and you're grounded and you've got your feet there, and you're still able to experience it. As you go more into the deep end, you have to let go more of that stability that you have. The discomfort that I feel with becoming is me jumping off the diving board, and it's okay. Here we go. Even this. I told Rob I'm not a great question answer person. Despite being a teacher, I tend to facilitate conversation better than I do being here. But with the lights and all of that. But it's I thought this morning throughout my prayer time with God and throughout the morning, and even just talking with somebody and saying a small prayer in my mind, like, give me words, give me your wisdom. It's just jumping off into the deep end, and it's uncomfortable. It's scary, and sometimes when you're becoming, you don't know what's going to happen. That's the scary part, is because we're so used to being conditioned to depend on ourselves and our own abilities, that when we start to let go of that and know that God will be there for us when we jump, that's scary, but that's faith, and that's the uncomfortable part. This whole year for me has been very busy, and we've had a lot of interactions, like Rob said, with the Afghans and with kids and schooling. It's just been a constant state of going, and this becoming process that I've been a part of, he's been able. The things that I've needed from him, he's provided. The energy, the joy, everything that I do in my life, just like things that you do, that you choose to have in your life, He's brought joy into it for me. There's nothing I would take away. There's nothing in all of the busyness of our days. There's nothing that I would want to take off my plate because God's given me that joy. And I didn't think I needed joy. I didn't think I needed energy. I've got coffee, but He gives it, and it's almost supernatural. It really feels, and even the joy that I feel in the things that I do. You know, we went for dinner at the Afghans last week. It was a weeknight. The kids had been in school. I had been in school. But we got there, and it was just enjoyable. And He brings that out in us when we are constantly in recognition of His presence. We're in the presence of His joy as well. And so the discomfort becomes easier to tolerate or easier to get used to.
You are a modern, educated woman in our culture. And you probably, the word submit is probably not your favorite word, I would think. I'm just guessing, just a guess. But that's what God requires all of us to do. How do you handle that? How do you reconcile that?
I think it's just the mere fact that He's God. I mean, who am I to think that I could do any better or plan any better for myself? I read that the word sacrifice in Hebrew or in Greek, I don't remember the language, means, where we think it means to give up, it actually means to come into communion with, to draw closer to. And so for me, to sacrifice or to submit my own will and what I'm looking for, what I want, that's no longer a prayer. I don't want what I want. I don't even know that I want what God wants. I want to want what God wants for me. That's been my prayer is give me the desire that you have for me. And He has. He's given me that. Everything that He's put in front of me, every opportunity that I've been given, He's used. And I think that's where that joy has come from. It's been giving that prayer over of let this thing that you have for me be the thing that I want to. And then that joy comes in naturally. It just happens because now what God is providing for me is the same thing that I want for myself. And it's
Do you get in situations where you think, I'm pretty sure God wants me to do that, but I really don't want to do that, and you just have to go on blind trust, just trusting God?
Yeah, that, like right now, that's happening. I did my notes. I've got 6 pages of my own notes I haven't looked at. And but this is the kind of thing that I thought, you know, when we were talking through this series in our planning team, I knew that the series for me, it was birthed 6 months ago when you first mentioned the concept of becoming. When I realized you spoke it, and I said that's what's happening to me. I know that's what's going on in my life, and it's taken me 6 months to kind of really digest that. And there's still things that I'm not super comfortable with or good at, but it's like, let's go, God. You got it. I'm willing, and I know that He's got the rest. And that's really all it has required of me is just that letting go.
How does, like in life, we have seasons. This is kind of like this 4 seasons of the year. And things change, we change, the way we feel changes. Have you noticed that there have been like seasonal changes since you've really started seriously following God?
Yeah, I think in the last, I was telling you and some friends that these last couple months, so I graduated in December. That was finished. I started working in October, so it's been a whirlwind these last 4 months for me, really even more than the last 2 years. But I'm tired. Like, I'm growing tired. I feel the weight and the wariness of that energy that I've been using because I've been going and going and going. And I'm sure that you all feel that at some point in your lives where you've been doing for so long and now you're just tired and you want to rest. And I feel that. But at the same time, I still have that joy. I still have that supernatural energy that God has gifted me. And I know that I hear, even though my wariness is here and I feel like it's almost palpable, I think that is God. I'm still figuring it out, but I feel like that's God saying, there's coming a time of rest, and you're going to have to take that opportunity. And so instead of me, I guess, seeing it as, okay, well, God, I've done all these things, God, and now I just need to say no and set some boundaries, which I know how to do and I'm good at. You can ask my husband. But, but I think instead of me being tired, like I just think I'm getting ready for a different season of peace that's coming and a different season of quiet. And I almost feel like God's preparing me for that because I've been so busy, and it may be hard for me to slow down. And it may be in my nature to want to keep doing. And I think God is telling me it's time to take a breath. And so, I don't know what that looks like. I just know that it seems to be happening in a different way, and things are kind of changing in my life. And I know that in the end, God is going to use me in the way that He has planned for me.
Yeah. Well, we have situational challenges in life, just things that happen that cause us stress and that challenge us. But most of our challenges are with people. How has this, I know I'm throwing you some curves today, but how has this becoming, the changes that are going on internally in your own heart, how has that changed how you deal with people? And I know it has, because we talk so much about our lives around the table, and I know that you've faced some relational challenges. And how has it changed your perspective on that?
Yeah, during this process, this last year and a half, where I knew something was changing in me, I didn't know if it was just because of school or because of whatever. And then it wasn't until 6 months ago that I could really identify it. But before that, I'd gone through some friendship issues with some very close Christian women who had been my core people here in Huntsville. We moved here 6 years ago, and I think you all probably know when you hit like 40, it's hard to make friends. And so I had found this great core group of friends, and as this process was changing in me and I was becoming more in communion with God, they noticed that shift in me, and I didn't understand it. They didn't quite understand it. And so we've had to part ways, but again, it's not in a maliced way, but it's definitely changed the way that I've decided who I'm going to let in my life and who I'm going to surround myself with, but also that I can affect people's lives without being, subject or around people that may not have the same goals or aspirations or focus or even connection. So for me, it's changed my relationships as far as making sure that I've been more intentional about my relationships, my friendships, that I'm choosing people that are reflecting God's nature, and that for the people that don't, I'm still close with them. I still love. And that's one thing with the Afghans that God really spoke into my heart, is how much people, He loves all people. And we're not necessarily here just to, we're showing our action, or we're showing Jesus through our actions. Okay, so they don't, we have not shared Jesus with them, but whenever we talk to them about why, whenever they ask us, we take that opportunity. Why are you doing this for us? We don't even know you. And that's our response, is because we love Jesus. They haven't asked about Jesus. We haven't brought up the conversation, but it's our hope, it's our desire that they are seeing Jesus through us. And I think with that, that's the best way I could possibly affect the people around me, is just to have that.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, you just hit on something that really gets me. I was having a conversation with a really close friend of mine not long ago, and I was encouraging him to open his mind and his heart to other people who don't believe exactly what he believes, and to trust God with them. And he used the word universalist with me, like, Rob, are you a universalist now? I am so far from being a universalist. But let me tell you what I am. I am a follower of Jesus Christ. And Jesus didn't care who the person was, where they were from, what their problems were. He loved them, and he loves us that way. And the best thing that we can do is what you just said. Let them see Christ in us. I'd rather for it to take some time and to work than for me to come at someone with the quote truth, telling them that they need to change their life and be more like me. I think that if the church could ever choose the heart of Christ over specific denominational beliefs, I think we could really get somewhere in this world. Last thing, as we still have communion to do, the last thing is you have a mentor. And that's been very interesting to me. I've had several mentors over my life and still have people that I talk to and people that I can confide in and talk to about my messed up heart and my messed up junky life in places, What is that like to adopt that? It's been a long time ago for me, but what has it been like for you?
Yeah, I never thought about having a mentor. It's not something that was ever on my radar, but a year and a half ago when this was starting to evolve, that was the moment that I knew when I asked God, how can I become closer to you? He put a name on my heart, and it was a woman that I'd met at a different church here in Huntsville when we first moved, and I didn't know her very well. She had that light, so I knew that she's got that light. We talked a little bit, but I just didn't know her very well. But her name, I couldn't get her name out of my head, and that was one of those uncomfortable things, because I felt him saying, call her and ask her to mentor you. And I argued with God, like you do. And it took probably 3 or 4 days of me going back and saying, I haven't talked to her in years, and I don't even know how to get a hold of her. And so I realized, okay, well, this is what he wants me to do. I'm not going to be able to keep ignoring this. So I went through Facebook and found the church that she goes to, and found her through different people, and then got her number, and then I texted her, and she was so excited. She remembered me, and she was so excited and happy to hear from me. And I said, I don't know what this means, but I feel like I'm supposed to ask you to mentor me, and I'd like to draw closer to God, and I feel like you might have the answer for how I should do that. And so we agreed to meet for coffee, and we've been meeting once a month for the last 18 months, and we read through a book. We're on our second book, but we just meet at different coffee places, and she I don't think she would call herself a mentor. She's a little bit older than me. She's 60. So I think that that's the relationship I had in mind, but I don't think she would say that. I think it's more of we're discipling together, and we just talk through our lives. We talk about, there's three things that we really do. We're intentional about keeping God in our conversation. We don't let our conversation drift off into, sometimes we just need a vent or whatnot, but we're always constantly bringing each other back to God's provision. We're also we prioritize each other. So if once we put our meeting in the calendar, it's in there, and that's what we stick to that. And then we check in with each other. And she has spoken so much truth and helped me realize this process and what it is. And she's, I think, going through it as well as I am. And I think that's just kind of one of those seasons that, or part of the process is that it just keeps happening in a deeper and deeper way. The discipleship and the friendship that I've developed with her has really brought my faith into a closeness with God that I didn't expect.
Yeah, and I'll say about, you can call it a mentor, or you can have a group of friends. It could be one or two. It could be one person. It could be two or three or four. But without friends, I'm talking about very close brother. If you're a brother, it's brothers. If you're a sister, it's sisters most of the time. I have a lady who is old enough to be my mother, who has been a source of grace and truth and help over the years. I think that's unusual, but I just don't think you get to the next level without those relationships. I don't think you get there. I don't think you can move on with just your checklist. Anything else?
Only that God, He has provided this manna. They talk in the Old Testament about manna and this provision of energy and sustenance. And when I was thinking about manna, I was thinking of it in the form of the energy and the joy that I talked about. It wasn't steak that God rained down from heaven. It wasn't pizza or wonderful Italian food. It was simple bread, and it was just enough for that day. And that was the sustenance that they needed to get to the next day. And I think that that's what I've grasped onto, is that not having to worry or think about what is going to come, because I know that whatever it is, God will provide it and give me that manna, give me that energy or the joy or the opportunity to continue forward the next day. I don't have to think about where it's coming from. I know that I've dropped my expectations, and the only thing I have now is to expect that God will be there. And I know that He is.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Julie. Thank you. Would you stand? Let's pray.